Jane Fonda. What's your relationship and connection to Jane Fonda?
Well, after 2 years in New York and as the head of the National Lawyers Guild, one of the things that I did was I set up a project in Asia to provide legal representation to American military people who were increasingly in opposition to the war in Vietnam and were involved in all kinds of political turmoil. We wanted originally to go to Vietnam. I traveled and I couldn't get into Vietnam, but that coincided at that point in the time with the war. This was 1971, where ground troops were being withdrawn in any event, and the war was really shifting to an air war, and it was being fought from bases outside of Vietnam for the most part, including primarily naval bases, where ships were coming in the Philippines and elsewhere. So we decided we would proceed with the project. We wouldn't go to Vietnam, but we would set it up in the Philippines, and then we would travel from there to Vietnam, Japan, Okinawa, various places where all of this political turmoil was playing out in the military. So after setting up the project and getting the funding for it, I could not resist going myself as one of the original staff lawyers. So in September of 1971, I, with 4 other people, traveled to the Philippines, and we set up this office. And then I went to Japan, where there was one particular Marine base, where there was just a hub of political activity, and I did a lot of work there. In the midst of that, in November of 1971, we found out that Jane Fonda was going to bring a troupe of people who were like an anti-war group of entertainers to entertain the troops. And this was sort of in distinction to Bob Hope, who would take his very pro-America, pro-war reviews to Vietnam and elsewhere amid a whole lot of publicity. So Donald Sutherland, Jane Fonda, and a crew of a number of people arranged this tour. They gave a show in Hawaii. They went from there to the Philippines. They came to Japan. They went to Okinawa. And I guess it went on for about 6 or 7 weeks, something like that. So I met them in Japan, and I was responsible for traveling with them and organizing a lot of the activities. And there's a movie that was made. I'm actually in the movie as well.
Right on.
And we became very close. I was responsible for a lot of the, as I said, activities that occurred outside of the shows, where they would talk to members of the military. They would get an understanding of what the conditions were in those countries. And it was a fabulous experience because they're a very really good group of people, and it was a wonderful experience. So Jane and I connected, and then when I came back to the United States after doing that, that was 1972. There was an incident that happened in California on a Navy ship, the USS Ranger, where it was about to leave to go to Vietnam, and they went out for their last training trip, and all of a sudden they found that somebody had thrown some implements in one of the gears, and the whole gear was destroyed by these implements. So they had to go limp back into Alameda, and they found these implements in the gears, and they eventually arrested somebody for having done that and charged him with sabotage in time of war. And I couldn't resist doing that case. So I was retained to do that case in about August or September of 1972. And we had a fundraising event at UC Berkeley for the case. And Jane came and she brought a clip of the movie that had been made of the tour in Asia and showed it. And it really provided the impetus for us to successfully defend that case because, the publicity was just incredible. It was, it was on the front pages of all of the newspapers. Well, the day that he was acquitted, almost a year later, my parents were getting on a plane in Paris, and somebody showed them the international edition of the Herald Tribune, and there I am on the front page with my client walking out of court when he'd been acquitted. And this was just a wonderful hour, and Jane really was cooperative and helpful in that. And most recently, the third episode was that I represented a guy by the name of Aaron Watada, who was from here, who was the first officer who refused to go to fight in Iraq. And Jane helped raise some money and some support for Aaron in his case, and so I was in touch with her around that. I'm very impressed by her. She's very easy to talk to. She's very gutsy. She's very principled, and I've been very fortunate to have that connection.